Welcome to Distinctive Voices. I'm your host, Susan Marty. Please join me in welcoming tonight's speaker, Dr. Clifford Nass.
Thank you. Delighted to be here today, and thank you for braving the rain. I know that's an unusual occurrence in this part of California. Up at Stanford, we do get rain this time of year, and so we're a little better able to cope with it. What I'm going to be talking about today is actually two different parts of my research. The first part has to do with how people treat computers as people, and the second part has to do with how we can use that to learn about how people can successfully treat other people. And then if people are interested in the question, I'm more than happy to talk about the other research area, which is about chronic multitasking. So for those of you who are hoping that I talk about that today, I apologize. But this stuff is great, I promise. And I'm happy to talk about that during the questioning. So there's a field out there called human-computer interaction, another field called human factors. And both of those study how do people interact with interactive technologies like computers or other technologies that respond to us and communicate back to us. I work in a rather small and rather, I think, bizarre area of that, which is studying specifically the ways in which people treat technologies like people. Now, you might think that's going to be a tough thing to study after all. Well, maybe you'd have to look at little kids or, people locked away, unable to communicate with other people and nothing else to communicate with. Or maybe you have to find some one of those quick, rare examples like you scream at your computer, perhaps not all too rare, but not the type of sustained reaction we might think about here. Or, we sort of get very attached to our BlackBerry or our iPhone or what have you. But I'm actually interested in what turns out to be an incredibly common response, namely that to a remarkable degree and across all people, all of us treat technologies, especially interactive technologies, as if they were people. And let me go even stronger and say, to a remarkable degree, we apply the same social rules, the same expectations, and the same beliefs and appropriate behaviors that we use towards other people when we're interacting with technology, even though we vehemently deny it. And after showing you that, I'm then going to go further and say, you know what? That isn't just important to know if you're designing technology. That's going to be even more important to know when you interact with other people. Okay, so that's where we're going to go today. To give you an example of how strongly people treat computers like people, consider if I asked you, how do you like my suit today? If you had answered that question to me, you'd presumably say, oh, it's great, it's fabulous, it's wonderful, because you know it's important to be polite. You know that if you said you didn't like it, it would hurt my feelings. So you would be polite. However, if the person next to you whispered, psst, how do you like his suit? It would be an odd thing to whisper at a session like this. But if somehow they did, after wondering why they would ask that, you'd probably say it's nice or okay or what have you, but you wouldn't have the same vehemence. Because after all, you wouldn't worry about hurting my feelings. Now, would you worry about hurting a computer's feelings? Let's find out. So we bring people into the laboratory, and these are perfectly normal people. I'll tell you a little bit more about how normal they are in a minute. And we have them do a task, and then ask them to, with the computer, and then ask them to evaluate the performance of the computer. A very common thing in software study. In the first case, we have people work with the computer, and then fill out their answers via paper and pencil. In the second case, we have people work with the computer and then answer the questions about how the computer did on the computer they were just working on. Now, you're all laughing thinking, doesn't seem very likely that there'll be differences, and maybe some of you are thinking, aha, I've caught him. It's not just that they're answering on the same computer. It could just be people answer differently to computers than they do to people. You may have even heard of research that says that. So perhaps people just like being nice whenever a computer asks questions. So to make sure, we engaged an objective third party, another computer called B. So some people, everyone used computer A to do a task. Some people were asked about performance in paper and pencil, some by the computer they work with, and some by a physically identical but different computer across the room. What happened? Well, we look at these first two conditions and we ask, and it turned out that when people answered on the computer they worked with, they gave significantly more positive responses than they did when they answered on paper and pencil. But now, you may be wondering, is that because people are polite, or is that because people simply like saying nicer things to computers? What happened with the different computer? Well, frighteningly, they got the exact same score as paper and pencil, much lower than the same computer. That is, people were polite to a computer. Who were these ludicrous people who don't understand? They were graduate students in computer science at Stanford. I know Irvine students would do much better. But nonetheless, we then asked them, would you be polite to a computer? And to a person, they insisted absolutely not. Only an idiot would say nicer things to a computer that asked about itself than they would to a different computer across the room. No one would be that foolish. Okay. So something very puzzling happened there. So what it tells us is people are in fact polite to computers. Normal people are polite to computers, even when they know better, and even when they know they're not doing it. So let's see how this plays out in some other domains. Let's move from computers to cars. BMW invented one of the greatest state-of-the-art navigation systems of its time. And they put it in the BMW 5 Series in Germany. Very, very popular car, popular mostly among men. And to their horror, the navigation system, even though it was at its time the best navigation system, was a disaster. Why? Well, it had a female voice, and German male drivers would not take directions from a woman. Now, though you laugh, I decided to investigate this issue further. This was quite troubling. So, I listened in on the calls where people were complaining. So there would be a call to customer service, and the person would say, my navigation system is broken. They would say, what's wrong? And they would say, I cannot take directions from a female. The service person would calmly say, sir, it turns out that's not an actual female. It is merely a recorded voice. Not presumably news to the person. And they said, it doesn't matter. She's female. They then said, well, you really shouldn't worry because, in fact, the system was programmed and all of the directions were done by males. Sorry. The person said, it doesn't matter. So they had to have a product recall because the car was obviously defective and downloaded a male voice. Okay? Something's odd here. Show you the third example. It involves Microsoft in this case, developing one of the most innovative interfaces of all time. It was novel. It was powerful. It was awe-inspiring, and it became one of the most hated things in history. The famous Microsoft paperclip. Now, it wasn't just that people didn't like the paperclip, or they thought somehow it didn't do its job very well. The level of hatred and scorn directed at the paperclip is usually reserved for almost the most fearsome people in history. Stalin, Genghis Khan, and the paperclip evoke responses that you don't ever hear from a technology. Well, I was called in by Microsoft to help. They said, we really need you to resuscitate Clippy's image, and you can do anything you want, but you can't improve its algorithms. So I said, you mean you can't give better answers? They said, nope, but you can do anything else you'd like. So I thought, okay, it seems like this level of hatred must come from some really profound feelings. What type of profound feelings could there be? And I thought, Clippy is probably the most socially obnoxious thing you've ever met. What does it do? The first time you're writing a letter, it very kindly offered, oh, I see you're writing a letter. Would you like help? And you could say no, and it was fine. Second time you started typing a letter, it would say, oh, I see you're writing a letter. Would you like help? You indicated, no, I'm quite competent at letter writing. The third time, it would come back again. The 75th time, it would come back and ask, oh, I see you're writing a letter. Now, what happened? There is nothing more insulting to someone. If you really want to insult someone who you know, who you've met a number of times, indicate that you've never met them before. So, hi, lovely to see you for the first time. Person who I've met every day for a month. It's very insulting. And that's what Clippy did. He also failed to take the hint. He also appeared at random times. He barged into your work. He did everything wrong. So I knew that if people respond socially and there was a social problem, we should use a social strategy to rescue him. So what social strategy did we use? Here's one we used. We had Clippy ask the question, was my answer helpful? They do this right now in a great deal of software. And if you say yes or no, it then says we will tell customer support. We did something a little different. If you said no, Clippy said, that gets me really angry. Let's tell Microsoft how bad their help system is. And he popped up an email to Microsoft customer support saying your help system needs work. As the person starts typing this email, Clippy says, come on, you can be more blunt than that. Let him have it. Okay. What happened? We have videotape of people leaving the room saying, I love that paperclip. I wish all software was like that. Clippy's obviously on my side. I love Clippy. It was a brilliant success. Sadly, not deployed. Why? Because although people loved Clippy, they hated Microsoft. Very good. Because after all, Clippy and you were now bonded in your joint hatred of Microsoft. So sadly, eventually, he was killed off and buried and not missed. All because he failed to understand the importance of social rules. This insight that people treat technologies as if they were people really led to my first career as an academic and as a consultant. What I would do is I'd go to the social science section of the library and look for findings concerning attitude or behavior towards people. Nothing about technology. But I would go in and cross out the word towards humans or towards people and scribble in the word towards computer or other technology. I now had a theory of how people would treat technology. But theories are cheap. Testing them is important. How could I test this theory? Wait a minute. All I did was I went to the next section of research papers, which describe experiments that people worked long and hard to design. And I stole them too. So I not only stole the theory, I stole the method. I did the exact same experiments that people did with people and simply plopped the computer in where there would be a person. And happily, in hundreds of studies, the rule still worked. No matter what I looked at, and I'll tell you some of the domains we looked at, and I'm happy to talk about others, whatever people did with computers, people did with people. I would then use that to apply it to information products and services. So I consulted on an enormous number of products, essentially making them more socially appropriate. Everything from the talking Barney doll to the Fidelity trade system in Japan, to the Schwab system, to cars. A lot of the new car interfaces, not just their voice, but also how they speak to you, all were based on the idea that technology should treat people socially. And, I did this for hundreds of studies, and it was a total blast. I would go into a company, I'd see their problem, I'd go race to the social science literature, I'd find the social rule, I'd say it's going to work for computers too, fix the system, and bang, it would work. It was a marvelous career. But a problem arose. All too frequently, social science failed me because of the silence of the social sciences. Many questions that were basic, important, applied to zillions of products, applied to zillions of important interactions we have with other people, the social sciences had no answer. Let me tell you 4 examples that I'll be describing today, giving you the right answer and how I found it. The first is flattery effective? So on the one hand, we hear flattery is obnoxious brown-nosing. People who flatter are despicable. But we also hear you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. Should we flatter people? Let me just take a quick poll here. How many of you think flattery is the first? How many of you think flattery is the second? Okay? Fans of the second. Okay? Let's check the next one. How can you help sad people? You encounter someone who's sad. Should you encourage them to be happy? Perhaps not saying something as obnoxious as, turn that frown upside down. That probably isn't going to work too well. But sort of nudging them along by telling them happy things, happy stories, pulling them along to happiness, or should we just go with their sadness and be sad back? Let me ask a vote on this one. How many of you think we should encourage people to be happy? How many of you think we should go with their sadness? Okay? Third one. Team building. Everybody knows, and in fact it's true, there's an enormous amount of research that teams are awesome. When people are on a team, and teams have incredible positive effects. But how do you create it? Many, many companies believe in team building exercises. There are companies that do this. They put an incredible amount of money. How many of you have been on like team building retreats of one kind or another? Okay? How many of you enjoyed and thought they were great? Okay, I feel good, okay? But in general, how many of you think team building exercises are great? How many think they're a waste of time? Okay? Good? Okay? Last, how do you persuade people effectively? If you want people to trust you and think you're competent, one theory goes, expertise will tell. However, there's a lovely Mexican saying, build a reputation and go to sleep. In other words, just go, and once you got a reputation, just make believe it's still there. Don't actually discuss it. How many of you think that in the long run, expertise will tell? How many of you think build a reputation and go to sleep? Okay, good. All right, there's lots of disagreement. Let's see how we find out and what to do. So, I just thought I needed the answer to these questions and hundreds of others, because there's all these things where social science disagrees, where there are proverbs on both sides, right? Many hands make light work, but too many cooks spoil the broth. Which is it? Etc. Hundreds of these adages that conflict. I didn't know what the heck to do, and the social sciences wouldn't help me. So, how was I going to find out? Well, I thought, all right, if the social sciences won't help me, I'll just ask somebody. So, I learned the hard way that was not a good idea. The first person I dated, it came from dating. My two examples here of bad things do both come from dating. The first person I dated, we dated a few times, and then she dumped me. And I said to her, that's okay, I'm sad, but that's okay. But, I'd really like to learn from this experience. So could you please tell me what I did wrong? Because a lot of things happened. Presumably some were right and some were wrong, and it would be really helpful so that I could learn better social rules. It didn't work. Okay. She slapped me and walked away. Okay. So asking people doesn't really help, because even if they do try to tell you, they don't know what's going on either. It's very hard to know what social rules are because it's hard to test. Conditions change, etc., etc. So then I thought, all right, I'll give up on that. I know what I'll do. I'll copy the most suave people. So I would find someone incredibly suave and do what they do. This seemed like a great plan. So I did this in 2 parts, both dating tragedies. The first involved a guy who was so suave. This was 6th grade. I was a little young, but still learning. He went up to a girl's house, wrote on the sidewalk in chalk the following: I love you. The girl came out of her house, saw this, was entranced. They lived happily ever after for a semester or so, and it was awesome. So I thought, I've got it. But I want to show that not only am I emotional, I'm also intellectual. So I did the following. I love you. A female sheep is a ewe. How could she not appreciate this terribly clever? Sadly, it failed miserably because she thought I was offering to sacrifice the eyes and the heart of a sheep in honor of my love. It was a disaster. So this led to tragedy again. It turns out it's very, very hard to copy the most suave. I'll tell you one other example. I watched someone when I was a little older, and I watched them carefully, and I saw what they did was to very, very carefully watch their girlfriend, watch everything they did, pay attention to everything, and then seemingly suggest just what the girl would want. So he noticed that blue was her favorite color and get her blue stuff, and he would notice that her favorite food was this, and he'd recommend it seemingly just gracefully, etc. And he knew everything, and by knowing so much, by paying so much attention, he did great. So I thought I would do that too. But I thought it would help to have some cooperation. So I said to the girl, look, I really want you to like me. So I'm going to watch everything you do really carefully. I'm going to keep my eye, I'm going to take notes, I'm going to be watching you 24/7. Not for one moment will I not be monitoring and thinking about what I should do for you to like me. Bad. Stalking. But this was puzzling to me. Why is it if you don't tell someone, it's called charming and suave, and if you do tell someone, it's called stalking? Complicated. So I decided I was not meant to learn things through observation, through learning. And most of us, even if you're not as acutely, incapable as I am, it turns out it is very hard to learn everything from observation and stuff. So I decided I had only one choice left. I would beg the social scientists, please do these social rules. I'm in desperate need. And frankly, many people for many of the rules, you saw people disagreeing. I can list more. We're likely there'll be even more disagreement about what the right thing to do is. Please do these studies. And the social scientists refused. Not because they didn't want to answer the questions, but because it was impossible for them to do so. What was so hard? It has to do with the problem of a Confederate, not a rebel soldier in the Civil War. A Confederate is someone who secretly works with the experimenter. The reason that's important is to study how something affects people. It would be really great if everything about the experience was identical except for the thing we wanted to study. Does that make sense? So you really need that Confederate to behave the same way for every person so that we can see then how the person reacts. Not only do they have to act the exact same way, whether they're tired, whether they're distracted, whether whatever, even worse, they have to do that regardless who they're interacting with. They could be interacting with someone who looks violent. They have to act the same way. Someone who looks like their mom. Someone who looks like this or talks like that or whatever. It's incredibly difficult to act the exact same way no matter who you're talking with. And even worse, they have to make sure, which is impossible as well, that they have no relevant personal characteristics. It's often the case they shouldn't be male or female, a tough one. They shouldn't be short or tall, a toughie, etc. And at the same time, they need to be, despite all this, clearly social. So this seemed hideous. So these social scientists said to me, we can't do it. We give up. There's no way to do it. And I thought to myself, if there was only something that people would treat like a person, that could behave the same way all the time, regardless of who they were interacting with, they wouldn't be fazed by what you look like or what you sounded like, without any relevant personal characteristics, we could sort of get rid of all that, and that nonetheless evoke clearly social things. I couldn't think, what the heck could I use? What the heck could I use? And the answer came to me by watching C-SPAN. C-SPAN, you think? First of all, who watches C-SPAN? But second of all, what the heck could be going on in C-SPAN that could be of any value? And the answer came to me from Shari Lewis. Many of you may not remember, but Shari Lewis was the brilliant puppeteer, passed away unfortunately a few years ago, absolutely spectacular puppeteer. Shari Lewis was testifying before Congress about an issue she felt very strongly about, namely violence in children's television. But she didn't testify alone. She brought lamb chop. Now, you're watching TV, you're seeing Congress, and all of a sudden you see Shari Lewis with a little puppet. Okay? Not the first time a puppet's appeared before Congress, but hopefully it's not too common. Now, okay. Even scarier, in answer to one of the questions, Lamb Chop testifies. So you can read the congressional record and find a statement from Lamb Chop the puppet. Think about this as you vote on Tuesday. Okay? So, in Lamb Chop's Lamb Choppy voice, which I will attempt to imitate, you will forgive me that one, I don't sound very much like Lamb Chop. Number two, my mouth will move when I do this. And third, I don't have a sock on my hand, but I will still try to imitate it. Lamb Chop in her Lamb Choppy voice, in answer to the question by the representative, said, violence in and children's television is very bad. It scares kids, it makes them violent too, and it should be banned. Quite a thoughtful statement from Puppet. The representative then said, do you agree with Lamb Chop, Miss Lewis? Now, you guys are fast. God, I've never had an audience this fast. You figured that out in under a second. It took the gallery 1.4 seconds to laugh. It took the other representatives 3.4 seconds to laugh. And it took the poor person who asked the question, who was fortunately retired, 7.3 seconds before he started laughing and said I was only kidding. It was clear he wasn't. And it struck me that, aha! That's the answer? Sock puppets. I will do research with sock puppets and understand human behavior that way. Unfortunately, I wasn't a ventriloquist, which made it a little difficult. And even worse, like you, eventually, very quickly people realized that while you might ask a sock puppet a question, after a while, you do catch on. So I was stuck. But many of you did figure out the setup. You're a very smart audience, and you figured out that, in fact, the good thing to use is not a sock, but actually a computer. In fact, computers are the perfect confederate. They evoke a wide range of social responses. They can do the same thing 24/7. They're not influenced by their own subconscious responses because they don't have a subconscious or even a conscious. And they can avoid users' unconscious biases by not manifesting gender, age, etc., those other characteristics. So it finally occurred to me, I know you guys figured out much quicker than I did. It took me a long time, but I realized, aha, we can use computers to answer questions, not simply steal from the social sciences, not simply steal from the effective way people should deal with people to understand technology, but we can do something much better. We can actually discover how people can effectively work with people, not only improve technology, but improve people as well. So, not only do we get guidance for people, but think about it. When you program a computer, the rules have to be unambiguous. They have to be rigorous and straightforward. Most of the social advice we get has none of those characteristics. So wouldn't it be great to actually have advice that really is unambiguous, that really is rigorous, we've tested it, and is really straightforward? This seemed like a gold mine of ideas for how to treat other people. These rules are incredibly powerful. They're so powerful that they can even help a computer be socially successful. And if they can help a computer be socially successful, just think how better it would work if you were a person, which presumably you are. Okay? So in fact, it helps people even more than computers. So this has been my new career. Help people rather than machines. It seems like a good slogan. But fundamentally what it says is, let's not just take rules about people that we already know and apply them to technology. Let's also take rules of how people treat technology and apply that back to people. So that's what we're going to focus on in this part of the talk. Note, both of those work together, of course, and in fact, the nice thing about this area of research is it does force us to nail down what social rules are, to present them in a way that's powerful and useful. And so that's what I do in my research now, is to say, here really are clear, unambiguous, exactly what you should do in various social situations. Okay. So let's explore, you'll remember those 4 questions I asked at the beginning. Let's explore flattery first. Honesty is a very good policy, except for politeness. You should, when you're polite, you're not necessarily honest. But what about flattery? Does everyone hate flatterers, or are people suckers for flattery, in the words of Cialdini? And what about unwarranted criticism? If it's bad to flatter, is it good or bad to say nasty things about people that aren't true? Is it that people will just ignore your negative remarks and say, well, he's in a bad mood? Or in fact, will people be devastated by calumny, the use of an incorrect or false evaluation? So here's the experiment we did. It was actually quite simple. We have people work with a computer, and as they're working with the computer's evaluating their performance. Half of the people are told that the evaluations they're receiving are based on years of research. They're extremely accurate. And the other half are told, we didn't have any chance to write evaluation software yet, so these are just random comments we scribbled down. They have absolutely nothing to do with you whatsoever. We just scribbled them down. So remember, 1, highly accurate, thoughtful, carefully pondered, totally correct for you versus totally random. And we did that with positive, so that we had true praise and flattery. We also did that with negative, so we had them being told these are totally accurate, and the people were told they did very badly, or we just told them they were random comments. Does that make sense to everybody? And then we have one group that got no feedback at all. Okay, so what happens? Are people suckers for flattery? Okay, well, let's see. Here's how well they thought they did. This dark green bar is when they were told these evaluations are absolutely, totally accurate. The light green bar is when they're told the evaluations are absolute and total nonsense. They worked the same. People thought they did just as well when they were given gross flattery as when they were told it was correct. What about criticism? Nope. Sincere criticism, people thought they did terribly, but they were able to ignore the insincere criticism. So, they suck in praise, they ignore criticism, whether true or not. Okay? How did they feel about themselves? Well, whether it was sincere or not, they felt great about themselves. They thought they were wonderful. And with criticism, once again, the guys who were told they really did badly and it was accurate thought they did bad, and these guys, there's no significant difference here. Basically, it's roughly the same. That is, insincere criticism, they just shrugged off. Now, here's my favorite. Consider that computer. In one case, that computer is terribly smart. It has incredibly complex and accurate evaluation software. In the other case, the computer's a total idiot. It just spits out random comments. Right? But look how smart it is. It's just as smart when it flatters as when it's sincere. Even though people were told it didn't know anything. Boy, was it smart. Why was it smart? It knew how great they were. How could that be dumb? Right? And when they criticized, the computer was not, whether it was sincere or insincere, it wasn't a very smart computer. We'll see this result gets a little more subtle later. But okay. Now we know about that. We know that flattery is great. Flattery is awesome. It works really well. And insincere criticism probably isn't a good idea because people get mad at you and stuff. Okay? Now, what about self-criticism or modesty? Is modesty the best policy? How many of you think modesty is great? How many of you think modesty is bad? Okay? Oh, people don't have a clear view. But you have to make this decision all the time. You're asked to evaluate yourself in your workplace, etc. You have to decide, is modesty a good idea or not? What about blaming your partner instead? So when something goes wrong, you got to blame someone. You might blame yourself. You might blame them. Or you might blame a third party. Or try to avoid blame. So to study this question, think how hard this would be with the Confederate. No matter who they're talking with, they've got to either be modest or blame them. The person could be highly attractive or desirable, and they wouldn't want to blame them, and they'd feel funny bragging, etc. It gets very complicated. Computer has no such problems. So we had a telephone system that did recognition, right? The ones like the airlines when you call up and say, I'd like to book a trip to Boise, and sometimes it understands you and sometimes it doesn't. It's interesting to note that most, virtually all, currently deployed voice systems are modest. When something goes wrong, they say something like, this system failed to recognize what you said, right? Or they'll say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Okay? However, we also designed a system that said, please speak more clearly. Shape up. You know, stop mumbling. Speak more slowly. Get it right, bozos. Now, while you're all laughing at that, think in some sense that probably would improve accuracy. That is to say, if you did speak more clearly, things would go better. But all of you think, God, no system would ever say something like that to me. Or the simple, please repeat. Doesn't blame itself, doesn't blame you, just says, say it again. Not saying whose fault it is, just that. So let's see what happens. This was an Amazon.com voice website. People were ordering books on Amazon. How willing were they to buy books? Well, when the system blamed itself, that is, was modest, they were very happy to buy books. And when the system blamed no one, they were also very happy to buy books. Basically no difference. But when the system blamed the user, they weren't going to buy books from it. No big surprise, right? After all, it's obnoxious, the heck with it. Okay? How friendly was it? This one, you don't need to be a social psychologist to know the answer is when it blames itself. Oh, what a nice guy. Blames nobody, okay, but it's not as nice as blaming yourself. And, of course, blaming you is pretty obnoxious. Okay, no surprise there. How smart was the system? Okay? Well, when the system blamed itself, it's there. When it blames no one, it's smart. After all, it just told you it's more stupid. It said, I didn't understand that. Didn't understand that either. Didn't understand that at all. Smarter. What about when it blames you? It's a genius. Now, you may wonder, why is that? And the answer is, think about movie critics. The smartest movie critics are the ones who hate all movies. And the dumbest movie critics are the ones who like all movies. However, think about this paradox. Why would you go into a profession where you hate everything you do? Like, if you said, boy, I hate movies, viscerally. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a job where I watch movies all the time. That sounds pretty stupid, doesn't it? Yet these are the really smart ones. Why? Because there's something smart about negativity. And in fact, research shows that if you even tell people know this one intuitively, although they didn't realize it, if you tell people you're going to speak in front of an audience and the audience is they're told the audience is intelligent, they say nasty or they give much more negative speeches than if they think the audience is not intelligent. Because we have this sort of vague instinct that being sort of cruel but brilliant. And this has been done with book reviews. The book reviews that have more negative comments are seen as smarter, better written, et cetera, except my book, of course. So, how then can we learn, since the computers have sacrificed all their time and energy for us to learn these things, what can we learn to improve praise and criticism? First of all, we should praise other people very frequently, and even when it's baseless. One of my favorite examples of this was the spell checker. In the old days of spell checking, it didn't do it as you type, but you would type your document, and it would then go through and check all the errors, right? Well, we designed a kinder and gentler spell checker that would identify all your errors, but every now and then go along and say, Questadactyl, you spelled that correctly. That's awesome. Okay? Which was true. And every now and then, it would say, your spelling's improving, whether it was or it wasn't. Okay? So what happened? Did people say, oh, you're wasting my time telling me about the words I spelled correctly. Just get told the negative stuff. No. They loved that spell checker. Not only did they think it caught more errors than the nasty one, they're willing to pay more for it. So praise, praise, praise. Praise all the time. Don't be afraid to praise. Modesty is friendly but dumb. Criticism is unfriendly but smart. So the decision of whether to be modest is the decision of whether you care more about people's liking you or how smart you seem. Now, a famous one, this is one that almost everyone gets wrong. When I became a professor, and likely many of you, when you were taught how to evaluate in the workplace, you were told the criticism sandwich, which was you start out and praise the heck out of the person. Then you criticize them. But of course, the problem with criticism, the funny thing about criticism is, think about it this way. When you praise someone, say something nice to someone, you don't feel like you have to keep going. But have you ever noticed when you criticize someone, all you want to do is keep on criticizing? That's actually a very profound human instinct that's been shown in the lab. Has to do with the nature of negativity in the brain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically what ends is they say praise a lot and then get out all the bad things. And then at the end say, but you're a swell guy. Turns out, for reasons that I won't have time to get into here, I'm happy to during questioning, this is terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. The right way to do it is a very quick intro, have very focused and limited criticism, and stop with one criticism or two at most, and then go on and praise like crazy, even though it's not instinctive. The reason has to do with, among other things, when people are criticized, their memory for what happened subsequently increases. Their memory of what happened before decreases. So the irony is, when you put all this big praise here, and then you start criticizing, they forget all about this. And you've all experienced that, right? People come and go, God, you didn't say anything nice about me. And you say, wait a minute, I praised you for 10 minutes before I told you the bad things. People go, I don't remember that. It's because of the way the brain's built with negativity and positivity. So it turns out what you do is, after this is when they're really paying attention, and then they do this. And what's funny is people say to me, yeah, but surely you want people to remember criticism. How many of you have trouble remembering being criticized? Being praised, you forget a lot. And again, it's a natural thing about the way the brain works. So it turns out, and we've done this with computers, and sure enough, Computer that uses criticism sandwich does terribly. The one that uses this strategy does very well, and again, there's a psychological basis for it. Okay, next one. Second domain we talked about was, I'm sorry to sort of race through all these, but dealing with sadness. So what should we do? Should we turn that front upside down or not? We know that happy people do well with happy people. What about sad people? Should you cheer up the miserable, or does misery love miserable company? Okay, let's see. So the way we studied this was in a car. We had people drive along with the navigation system that was friendly. It was friendly in the sense that it spoke to you. And here's how it sounded. This was the same actress saying the exact same words, but in a slightly different way that I think you'll notice. Come on. Hey, computers. Why is it doing it? Okay. Now, you tell me whether this is socially appropriate or not. To just jump to the last random slide. Okay. This is all intentional reminders, I wish. Or subliminal cuts. So subliminally, you're grasping the stuff much better than you ever knew. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I believe you to boot. And how insightful of you to notice. Okay, we're both happier. Okay, but you think neither of us is very smart because all we do is praise each other. Okay, so here's what the first one sounded like, and if it does it again, I'll quit. Okay?
Hi, my name is Chris, and I will be your virtual passenger for today. We are going to be driving on a coastal road, one that I've traveled many times before, but one that may be new to you. The trip shouldn't take too long, 10 or 15 minutes. Let's get going.
Typical chirpy, happy, pleasant voice, no complaints. There's the same actress saying the exact same words a little differently.
Hi, my name is Chris, and I'll be your virtual passenger for today. We're going to be driving on a coastal road, one that I've traveled many times before, but one that may be new to you. The trip shouldn't take too long, 10 or 15 minutes. Let's get going.
Okay. You're probably thinking anyone who used that voice would be fired even faster than the guy who invented the Microsoft paperclip. But let's see what actually happens. Here's the number of accidents with happy drivers. We induced happiness or sadness before the study started. Here is the upbeat voice, and there's a number of accidents. So we see that happy driver driving along happily. They hear that happy voice. They don't have hardly any accidents. But when they hear that second voice, it's distracting. It's weird. What's wrong with her? Why is she so upset? Enormous increase in the number of accidents. But what about that sad voice? I found this very surprising. For the sad voice, in general, accidents are more. But look at this. That flat, subdued, depressed voice led to less accidents, significantly less accidents. Turns out between about 4.5 and 7.5 than did that happy voice. So even though happy drivers do brilliantly with the happy voice, it actually disrupts and harms sad people. Happiness, misery may love miserable company. Let's see what else. Here's how distracted they were. For happy drivers, that sad voice was incredibly distracting. But for sad drivers, the happy voice was distracting. What does he know that I don't? Doesn't he care about me? I'm sad, and he's happily along. Okay. How much did they like the voice? Happy drivers love that happy. Now, here's one where you're thinking, nobody could like that second voice except upset drivers. They actually like the upset voice more than the happy voice. So even on a voice that you would think is horrible, they actually liked it more. Now, I'm just going to run through some other results. They're described in much more detail in the book and stuff. So in general, you should always match a person's emotions. You should never try to change someone by just going in and being the opposite. If you do want to change your emotions, you have to do it slowly, and what you do is you start by matching their emotion, actually being a little more in the direction you want them to go, and slowly change, and they will change along with you in an effect called emotion contagion. But if you immediately go in and just go, hi, I'm happy, why aren't you? Or even the more sort of, neutral form of, boy, did I have a great day, I'm sure that'll make you think to yourself, that'll make you happier. No, it won't. So you have to start with the other person. Do not label negative emotions. If you tell people they're happy when they're sad, they don't mind very much. But if you tell happy people they're sad, they get really mad. And in Japan, they get mad even if they're sad. Never say to someone they're sad. So don't tell people they're frustrated. Don't tell them they're angry. Don't ever tell people they're having a negative emotion, especially in the U.S. and even more so in Japan. Okay. Frustration needs more than sympathy. It turns out that to really stop frustration, you need to do active listening and such, and I'm happy to talk about more in the question. Okay, let me really quickly go through these studies on how to build a team, and the last two, because I promised you those. Okay, team building exercises are dumb. And the reason they're dumb is they don't have anything to do with what really makes the team. And so the short version is this. There's really only two things you need to know to build a team. Two things everybody needs to have a team. One is identification. We are number one. We are this name. So the team has a name. Having everyone share the name and making sure no one else has the name is very important. So, companies that give out T-shirts to everybody are making a huge mistake. You should only give out T-shirts to team members who should wear them all on the same day. So every Thursday is team day. Turns out that works really well, not just for people. Now you think, do we have computers wearing T-shirts? Almost. Here's the study we did. We took people and put them in two groups. One group, we gave a blue wristband and put a blue border around the computer and said, you are the blue team. Work together. The other half, we said, put a blue armband around the person, put a green border around the computer, and said, you are the blue person working with the green computer. Work together. Turns out, when you match, you're a team. People worked harder, tried harder, took the computer suggestions more seriously, and were more influenced by them, and liked the experience more. Now, you may think, oh my gosh, how could that happen in real life? The answer is, think back to summer camp and color wars. They take the camp, they divide it randomly in half, the blue team and the red team. And if you're on the blue team, something magical happens. Well, the blue team members get better looking. They're smarter, they're faster, they're stronger. And the red team people are obviously inferior. Oddly enough, if you're on the red team members are stronger, faster, better, etc., and the blue team members are lousy. It's because identification is powerful. The other one is dependence. If we remind you that you need each other to succeed, you also get all the positive effects of team. Team building exercise, and I go into more detail in the book, I'm happy to do it during questioning, turn out to undermine all of that. They do everything to hurt that. Okay, last one. Do you really have to be an expert? So I was inspired to do this study by The Wizard of Oz. So there's a point in The Wizard of Oz, the movie version, not the book. So the movie actually improved on the book, not a common occurrence. When the wizard says to the scarecrow wants brains. Do you all remember that? And the wizard says, look, all you need to have brains is to be labeled as smart. So I'm going to give you a Ph.D., a doctor of thinkology, and you will be smarter. And the scarecrow then proceeds to say the following. The square root of the hypotenuse of a right triangle is equal to the sum of the square roots of the opposite sides. Awesome, but false. Turns out it doesn't work. Squares works, but square roots doesn't. So it turned out the label was enough. How powerful are labels? Here's what we did. We had people go into the lab and we told them, you are going to watch news shows and entertainment shows, some situation comedies. And we told half of the people, you're going to watch them on a TV we use to show news and entertainment, and it's an ordinary TV. We told the other half, you're going to watch on two ordinary TVs. This is a TV we use only to show news, and this is a TV we use only to show entertainment. Perfectly ordinary TVs. Guess what? The people who saw the news on the news-only TV, not the news-only network, the news-only TV, thought the news was better, more interesting, more accurate, etc. And the people who saw the entertainment, the situation comedies on the entertainment TV, thought they were funnier, better written, etc. And the picture was better to boot. Okay? So that's how easy it is to be an expert. Just get labeled an expert. There's also another aspect of expertise. So one is getting labeled, the other is having people believe you care about them, and we can talk about that during the questioning. So let me end my talk by highlighting what I think is the true irony of this research. The irony is, it may be that the best way to understand, to deduce, to discover the best ways for people to successfully interact with each other is to use the most incredibly unsocial thing there is, a computer. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you. You've been a great audience.